All right, we've talked about flow, we've talked about delivery, we've talked about multis, and the fact of the matter is if you can master those things, I think 99% of people are going to say that you're an amazing artist. And I mean really master those things. You don't necessarily have to be an incredible writer in terms of producing content, because I think when it comes to the general population, most people don't really understand or really care to understand writing in, its full complexity. However, this is something that I want to look at today, and we'll go ahead and dive right in here. So I've got 8 different topics here. These are kind of all different ways that you could approach a track, hypothetically. So you want to create a song, these are different avenues that you can explore. Now, I think as humans, we really like to break things down into categories and really, put everything in its place. That's kind of especially when learning information, it makes it easier, I think. But the reality of it is that no song is really one thing. A song can definitely be storytelling and then also be positive or be political, or, it could be a combination of braggadocio and vulnerable. In fact, if I were to think of Drake, I would probably categorize a lot of his, music as that, kind of a combination of braggadocio and vulnerable. So I don't want you to think that you can only do one type of thing just because you're, approaching a song a certain way. I did want to clarify, when I consider dark, horrorcore rap, for example, would be dark. Anything that has to do with like gore, anything that has to do with maybe even like if you were to think of rock, like, black metal, like, anything with like Satanism and stuff like that, anything that's just really dark, like a horror movie, that all gets classified under, the category of dark for me. I'm pretty sure everybody knows what political is. I don't really need to go too far into that. That's definitely, a subjective thing. Whatever your ideal, position on politics is, that's something that you would portray in your music. I'm not going to go too in depth with positive. I think that speaks for itself. What I do want to talk about is the top 5 right here. And today we're only going to talk about the top 4, which is going to be storytelling, vulnerability, stream of consciousness, and conceptual. And then in the next video, I'm going to talk about braggadocio, which I think, is more like punchlines. But I want you to remember that this is basically a spectrum. Just because we have all these categories does not mean that they're pigeonholed into one particular thing. Now, no matter how you approach a track, remember these 2 things. Number 1, figure out what it is you want to say. Then number 2, figure out how to say it better. This is a key point that I really want to sink in. Figure out what you want to say, figure out how to say it better. So let me give you an example real quick. Let's say I'm writing a song, maybe I'm telling a story of some kind, and I want to say in the story, okay, I walked in on my wife or my, girlfriend cheating on me. That is an idea. That's me figuring out what I want to say. The one thing you don't want to do is just write, oh, my wife cheated on me, or I walked in on my wife. I could describe it as, I walked in and there was another man's clothes on my floor. Or if you're a woman, from that perspective, you could say another woman's clothes on your floor. If you're listening to that song, people can hear it and know what's going on, but you're not directly just saying that. There are always other ways to describe the same scene. Like, for example, if you were outdoors and having sex, you could be saying that your clothes are getting stained with grass. You're not directly saying that you're having sex with that person, but if you're outdoors, why else would you be on the floor with your clothes getting stained in grass? Unless there's, if you have enough context around it, people will understand, okay, these people are having sex. Or at least at the very most, laying on the ground and doing something together. You could say wrestling. Idea had a rap song where he said, he was talking about a prostitute and saying that, somebody to wrestle the demons out of his head. If you listen to Panic at the Disco, there's a song where he says that 2 people are exchanging body heat in the passenger seat. Again, another way to say that you're having sex without actually saying directly, okay, they're having sex. So the first step is always to figure out what it is you want to say, then figure out how to say it better. So what I want you to remember is that number 1, Google is your friend. You can always go online and look up different expressions and phrases and ideas for things. Even when it comes to rhyming, you have websites like RhymeZone, you have websites like b-rhymes.com. Rhyme Zone also has a feature where you can find near rhymes, even though they do have a lot of like perfect rhymes as well. And there are other websites where you can find, rhyme dictionaries. The second thing I want to point out is that details are necessary. And this is something that you learn probably in middle school or elementary school writing. It is always important to have details. Anytime you're telling a story or anytime that you're describing a scenario, make sure you're thinking about, okay, how can I make this into a more emotional phrase? Like, what kind of words can I use that elicit emotion? Or what kind of words can I say that will, get people to sense what I'm saying? For example, in the line from Panic at the Disco where he says exchanging body heat in the passenger seat, if you've ever embraced with another person, that's a sense, you feel that. Like, you can feel, the changing of body heat. So when you're listening and hear that line, you can immediately draw from experience and be able to picture what's going on. And you can picture it in a way that I think is much more vivid than saying, oh, they were having sex in the passenger seat. And that brings me to my next point, which is finding synonyms for common words. Remember that over time that there have been billions of people who have been writers in some way, shape, or form. And you don't want to be saying the exact same thing that 50% of those people have been saying. So instead of using words that are too simplistic and overused, you can try to find synonyms that mean the exact same thing but are just more clever. Now, the opposite end of that is being overly obscure, basically coming up with words and things that people have never even heard of. So when I'm listening to your music, I don't even know what you're talking about. So you kind of want to try to find a balance between being too wordy and then not wordy enough. Another thing that I see a lot of people do is they will use the same words over and especially in a very small window of time. For example, if you have two lines and you see yourself saying the same thing twice, what you can do is try to come up with a synonym for one of those two things. That way you're not, repeating yourself. Because having too much repetition can usually be a sign of bad writing. Really, if nothing else, kind of a sign of a limited vocabulary. The final thing I want to talk about is making changes to common expressions. Now, this is a good way to come up with something that's quotable. Now, I wouldn't do it every single line or even every other line, but this is just kind of a trick to have in your arsenal. And again, remember that Google is your friend. You can always go online and you can look up idioms, you can look up expressions, and you can probably find things if you do enough searching. So let's say that I come up with the phrase, okay, voice of reason. It's a somewhat common phrase that people use. It's obscure enough that it's not, overly used. So you could try to take that into a rhyme by, coming up with associations. Voice, what else, can a voice do? Well, a voice can laugh. So you might come up with a line like, I'm going to run from the voice of reason till it turns to laughter. And that's an actual line from the rapper named Idea. I just wanted to kind of walk through the, thinking process of, how you could come up with a line like that from an expression. The real important part of that is the association. So you come up with an idiom or an expression of some kind, and then you just need to think, okay, what other things are related to voices? When you have an expression like that, or even a word like, say, for example, voice, you should think of it as kind of like a road, and you should let your mind kind of walk down that road. What do I know about voices? Voices can be loud. Voices can be soft. You can't hear them if you're deaf. They have inflections. A ventriloquist might throw a voice. You can go down all these different ideas and try to think of how you can string them together and create a concept. So again, to reiterate the main point, number one, figure out what you want to say, and then number two, say it better. One other thing I wanted to say is if you're rapping about things that are real and people know that they're real, I think it really adds an extra element to your lyrics. Like, for example, when Drake did a diss against Meek Mill, the first line that he had in the track, Charged Up, he said, I did some charity today for the kids. And he actually donated $75,000 to Meek Mill's high school, former high school. And in my opinion, that makes the bar hit even harder because he's actually talking about real things. And even notice, he didn't say, I donated $75,000 to your high school. He kept the line somewhat esoteric, open for translation. If somebody like Jay-Z has a lyric like, I'm flying out to Italy to get pizza, I personally think it hits a lot harder than it does if some random rapper were to say that. Because everybody knows for a fact that Jay-Z very well has the money to do that if he wants to. Now me, I'm a nerd. I value education very highly. Jadena has a line in a rap song where he says, I've never met anybody smarter. That's why I got accepted, but I still rejected Harvard. Now, I'm a punchline type of guy. That's not a great punchline, But the fact that that is 100% real makes that probably the hardest thing I think I've ever heard in a rap song. And that's just my personal opinion. But I think when you're first starting out rapping, it's hard to really have that real authenticity to your lyrics. Because the reality is that you probably aren't a million or billionaire. Even Drake has a line where he says, I used to fabricate having money, now I really have it like that. It's also cool if you can take a negative and turn it into a positive. Now, the only example I can think of off the top of my head is Tekashi 6ix9ine. Obviously, he got arrested for snitching, and, there's a big cloud looming over his head. He doesn't try to avoid the fact that he's been snitching. In fact, he gets out, and the very first thing he says in a social media thing is, shut the fuck up before I snitch on you, or something like that. If you can take a negative perception and spin it around so that it's a positive, instead of letting that negative thing affect you negatively, that is a really powerful technique. Just as another example, when people would say something like Will Smith doesn't have to cuss and Eminem is, using a lot of profanity, Eminem went back and came out with a line saying, Will Smith doesn't have to cuss in his raps. Well, I do, so fuck him and fuck you too. Really what it is there's some kind of elephant in the room, and if you can figure out what that is and acknowledge it in a way that, spins it in your direction, rather than letting it bog you down, because if you leave the elephant in the room, people are probably going to view you as inauthentic. The last thing I kind of want to talk about is the illusion of consistency, meaning that if you write 500 songs and you only keep 10 of your best songs, they're going to be 10 pretty damn good songs. So I think that's a really good way to approach pretty much anything. If you're trying to come up with a chorus, it's a good idea to try to write maybe 10, 20 different choruses and find the best one. If you're trying to write a punchline, you can come up with 10, 20 different punchlines and keep the best one. If you're trying to make an album, make as many songs as you can keep. Professional rappers do this all the time. When there's a rapper that dies and they're still releasing music, it's because a lot of that music is stuff that they threw away. They were songs that they didn't keep because, they didn't make the cut. At the end of the day, it's all about quality control. There is nobody, absolutely nobody, who is 100% consistent all the time. Everybody has bad songs. Everybody has bad hooks. Everybody has bad lyrics. At the very least, they'll have lyrics that pop into their mind that are, terrible, and they're just like, oh, I'm not going to write that down. So the better job you can do of creating the illusion of consistency by creating a lot of quantity and then finding the quality is honestly probably a better approach than trying to make everything quality. Now, that's about everything I wanted to say about real content. I do have some song recommendations. Obviously, they're optional, but I'm going to categorize them based on some of those categories I had at the beginning of the slide. So the first department is storytelling, and I did want to say that with storytelling, it is very easy to be corny, I think. Especially if your lyrics are too simple, you really run the risk of, just sounding like a little bit, elementary. But these are some great songs that I think you should check out. You got Immortal Technique, You Never Know. Dance with the Devil is the more popular one from Immortal Technique. But both of these are great storytelling songs. Eminem Stan, you've probably already heard. There's a song by Atmosphere called The Waitress. There's another one called Yesterday. Both of those are pretty good. I think with all of these songs, they're telling a story, and pretty much all of them kind of have a twist to it. A really weird one is Part of Me, but I wanted to include it because, if you want a weird song, definitely check that out. He really kind of starts out the song, kind of normal, nothing unusual about it, and then toward the end, it just gets a little bit odd, but, it's got an interesting twist to it. I think it sounds good. I wouldn't, base your whole style on that song, but it is interesting to check out. Testify by Common is a great song lyrically. However, I'm really not a fan of his flow on the song, which, I'm hesitant to add it onto this list because of that. I just wanted to point out, I wouldn't model my flow off of what he does in that track. And then finally, Paradise by Idea and Abilities. Again, not really a storytelling song per se, but really, I think when it comes to writing things in kind of a poetic manner, Idea is one of the best writers that there was. Also, I wanted to say this is not by any means a comprehensive list. These are only the songs that, really just kind of stood out to me and, I was able to think of in the moment. So there are, millions of songs out there, and I know I'm going to be missing thousands without a doubt. I don't want people to get on me because I didn't say this song or that song. This is really just, a handful of songs that I could think of in the moment and that I thought were really good and worth the listen. So moving on, remembering the same thing, this is not a comprehensive list whatsoever. Jay-Z, 444. Jay-Z honestly has a lot of really vulnerable tracks. When it comes to vulnerable tracks, really the idea is that you're supposed to be rapping like nobody can hear you. You're really kind of getting there into your own thoughts and saying pretty much anything. The most sensitive and emotional things that you can possibly saying, all of your self-doubts, anything that you regret. It really is trying to rap like nobody's around and being your absolute self. And I think two really great rappers for that are Joe Budden and Jay-Z. And I did point out two songs here, but I definitely think you should check out their whole catalogs. With 444, Jay-Z is talking about, some of the stillborns that he had. He's talking about cheating with Beyonce. But at the end of the day, he's making that entire song from the perspective of himself, making a song to Beyonce. He's not making that song in the perspective of, okay, other people are going to hear this. I'm making this song so people know what's going on. He's literally just writing directly to a person. Same goes with Dear Mama by Tupac. He's writing from the perspective of himself, rapping to his mom. So really, the idea is that these are giving you a glimpse into who they are as a person when nobody else is watching, when all the cameras are off. And I think that that's something that a lot of people gravitate to and want to hear. The next topic is simply stream of consciousness, and the best examples I can think are probably these two, Sidetracked and Talking in My Sleep by Elzai. Both of those songs really are just, they're rapping about literally anything. They move from one topic to the next, and in a way they are kind of conceptual, but the real idea behind stream of consciousness music is to say the first thing that comes to your mind. Now you can still, reanalyze it and try to make it sound better, but there's something special about, just kind of breaking the fourth wall. For example, not in this song, but Joe Budden in the other song that I mentioned, The Future, he has a line where he's talking about his son and his baby mother. And then he has a line where he's like, maybe me and his baby mother can get along. And then he says, probably not, but the idea sounds good in a song. I mean, just listening to that, you can kind of tell he wrote down the line and then he literally thought to himself, that's not possible. Another idea might be if you're writing and you have writer's block, you can also just write and say, I'm having writer's block right now. It doesn't matter what it is. You're just writing whatever comes to your mind first, whatever you're thinking about at that very moment. Now, that being said, you don't want to have 100 different songs where you're saying I have writer's block. But these are all different, examples of kind of songs where I think, the writer is kind of just going and not necessarily overly analyzing, what they're going to say next. Then finally, we have conceptual songs like Joyner Lucas, I'm Not Racist. He does one verse where he talks about the debate on race from the perspective of a white person, and then he does the debate on race from the perspective of a black person. Nas, If I Ruled the World, he basically just talks about what he would do if he had, all the power in the world. I Gave You Power, he raps from the perspective of a gun. Lost Ones by J. Cole is also kind of a vulnerable track, but he kind of grapples with the idea of getting a woman pregnant and not really wanting to have a baby, but she doesn't want to have the abortion. And then finally, I Used to Love Her by Common, where he basically raps the whole track about how he used to love a girl, and, it's all a big metaphor for hip-hop. So once again, there are thousands of great songs out there, and this is not a comprehensive list at all. These are some of the first tracks that came to my mind, and I really think that, if you have any interest in checking them out, you should go do that. But these are all different ways to kind of approach the track, come up with different topics and everything. Again, recalling the one thing I really want you to take away from this more than anything else, number one, when you're going line by line and you're going into the next line, first figure out what you want to say, then figure out how to say it better. If you can do that, I honestly think it's hard to go wrong as a lyricist. At the end of it all, remember that rap is about being you. I can't tell you how to be you. I can tell you how to voice yourself a little bit better. But if you have experiences in your life, I definitely think you should talk about them, regardless of whether they're experiences that nobody has or experiences that everybody has. Because, either it'll be relatable or it'll be profound. I feel like if you're a genuinely optimistic person, you should try to make optimistic music. And, hip-hop can use a lot more of that. People like Chance the Rapper. If you're more political, you can bring your political ideas into rap. And don't feel like you have to conform to one thing or another. At the end of the day, this is all about being you, doing what you want to do, doing what is fun for you, doing what is therapeutic for you. Whatever reason that you make rap, let that guide the decision-making that you make in hip-hop. Anyway, that's about all I got for this video, so I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you for tuning in.